I'm Chris W. Kim. I'm the creator of Closing Act, and this is the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Chris W. Kim as he discusses his newest graphic novel, Closing Act, published by Conundrum Press. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Chris W. Kim is a cartoonist and illustrator from Toronto, Ontario. He's worked for clients such as The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Walrus, Bloomberg, Businessweek, and The Atlantic, among others. His first graphic novel, Herman by Trade, SelfMadeHero, was published in 2017, followed by Strays, published by SelfMadeHero in 2021, and Adherent from Conundrum Press in 2023. His newest graphic novel is Closing Act, published by Conundrum Press. Closing Act begins with this story. Leah walks her usual route through the city when a young man steals her bag. She chases him into an alley, but quickly loses her bearings. Each alley leads to yet another alley, the sounds of the city fade away, and the thief is nowhere to be seen. The graphic novel examines the complex networks that make up a city and finds a strange shifting environment within it, one where its inhabitants face a looming existential threat. So without further ado, here's my chat with Chris W. Kim as he discusses his newest graphic novel, Closing Act, published by Conundrum Press. So Chris W. Kim, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be on here.
Well, I appreciate your time. Before we get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what was the first comic book that you read?
Sure. I think the first one must have been Tintin. I remember my mom used to bring Tintins home from the library, the local public library, and especially The Crab with the Golden Claws. That's the one I remember. It had very vivid, kind of hallucinogenic imagery in it. So as far as I remember, that's the first one that really impressed something on me.
Yeah, definitely a lot of creators have mentioned that in the past. Hergé's work, definitely inspirational. But I'm wondering, who or what inspires you to create today?
Nowadays, it's just a little bit of everything. I try to take more from any medium that I can. So, of course, comics, but also movies, books, photography. Recently, I've really been into book cover design. I just love seeing how people from different parts of the world use just graphic design to communicate things, because book covers are a combination of, images and text. So I think that's why I'm particularly drawn to it. But yeah, just as many different sources as I can get, I try to bring them all together and hopefully make my own work more interesting and less narrow in its scope.
Well, we're here talking about your latest graphic novel, Closing Act. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the story. What is it all about?
Closing Act is about a woman named Leah, and she lives in a big city. And then one day she is walking down the street and someone steals her bag from out of her hands. So she chases the thief into an alleyway. But very quickly she loses track of the thief, and she finds that the alleyway leads into another alleyway, which leads into another alleyway. And it's just this whole kind of strange parallel world made up only of alleys. And so most of the book is about her exploring this world and the people within it, because it's inhabited by these strange, I call them alley folk, who have been seemingly living there for, God knows how long. And over the course, or actually very quickly, she finds out that the alleyways seem to be closing, gradually closing, and if anything, closing faster and faster. So she has to decide if she wants to stay in these alleys or if she wants to go back to her normal life. And yeah, it's really just an exploration of this space within a city, this kind of surreal space.
Well, what was your inspiration for the graphic novel?
The inspiration was super simple, which is that I like looking at alleyways. Like in real life, I like passing by alleyways and just popping my head in and seeing what's in there, because there's such strange, kind of anarchic places in the city that you normally don't go down. But they're so mysterious, they're potentially very dangerous, and very unorganized in a way that I like, very detailed. And there's something about the in-betweenness of alleyways that always appeal to me. So the basic or the starting idea was really just, what if a whole comic was set in these alleyways? And from there, I tried to kind of push that idea as far as I could and see where I ended up. But yeah, that was the starting point.
I was wondering if it's a comment on today's society, or am I reading too much into the story?
I think that's inevitably going to happen because, it takes place in a city. I live in Toronto, a big city. So I didn't try to push away from that aspect of it, but I also didn't want it to be just a metaphor or an allegory for society or something like that. I tried to treat this alley world as, I tried to take it seriously, kind of like how in fantasy or in sci-fi, people take the worlds seriously for what they are. But then you can also draw a lot of parallels to contemporary society if you want. It was like a balancing act between knowing that it was in some way addressing the modern world, but not reducing it down to that.
I wonder if we could switch gears a wee bit and talk about your creative process. Can you talk about the tools used to create your art?
For this comic, I drew it all by hand on 11 by 14 paper. Yeah, I used a combination of pens and brushes. Then I scanned those all into Photoshop, and I do all the colors in Photoshop. And I used to hand letter my comics, but this was the first one where I'm still hand lettering it, but I hand lettered it in Photoshop, meaning that I used a tablet. I still drew every single letter, but I did it all by hand, so to speak. So it's kind of half-half digital and analog.
Is that something you prefer, one versus the other? Would you rather be a traditional artist, or would you rather move into digital space?
I would rather be traditional, an analog artist or a drawer. I feel like you make much different decisions when you're drawing by hand. And I prefer that because, like, a lot of people talk about it in terms of friction. Like, there's a friction when you're doing it by hand that you don't get as much digitally, or you really have to try to simulate that friction when you're drawing digitally. That being said, I can't justify doing it all by hand. So I try to make a compromise. But yeah, I much prefer the feeling of pen to paper.
And I was looking at your bio. You've worked as an illustrator for a variety of different publications. My process is that because you had to do so much work for those clients, you'd prefer to use a digital method to speed up the process of delivering your content immediately. Is that true, or is that just an assumption?
No, that's spot on. Yeah. For illustration, I can't afford to do it by hand. I used to try and do it by hand, but you have to do so many adjustments after you hand it in sometimes. It's like, you might as well just do it all in Photoshop. And yeah, that's part of why I still do comics by hand, because I feel like if I give everything over to the computer, then it's like, I have no anchoring anymore, right? It's just, I want to have physical pens and I want to have ink and brushes. So it's like comics are that little oasis I have to still feel the grit of the paper.
Right, exactly. This is your second book with Conundrum Press. I want to ask about, how's it like working with them as a publisher?
Yeah, Conundrum's great. Of course, Andy is the man behind Conundrum. He's very accommodating. I love how diverse the kind of work that he accepts is. That's really what attracted me to Conundrum. And I'd read a decent amount of Conundrum books before I contacted Andy. But yeah, nothing bad to say about Conundrum. It's great.
They're good people, that's for sure. So we've been talking about closing act. I'm wondering if we could talk about your next project, or is it too early to say anything right now?
Yeah, I'm working on something new, but it is very early. I'm just kind of pushing around pieces to see what it's going to be. Way too early for that. But I will say I did a 4-page short little comic for Mubi Notebook, which is, Mubi is the streaming movie service, I guess you'd call it. And they have an online journal called Notebook. And they just commissioned me early this year to do a little 4-page movie-themed comic. It's up now on their site. And I also linked it from my social media stuff. So if someone wants like a quick hit of what kind of stuff I do, they can check that out.
Very good. Wondering if you have any events planned for this year to promote your book, Closing Act.
Yeah, in May, I'm going to the Montreal Comic Arts Festival. And I'm going to be there with Conundrum, of course. It's the 30th anniversary of Conundrum, so they're going to have a whole bunch of Conundrum people. Very happy to be there. And then in June, I'll be at TCAF, the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to those signings, those meetups.
Yeah, great events for sure. So with everything that you have going on today and in the future, where do you recommend that people go online to find out more about you?
So I have a website and it's chriswkim.com. And I also have an Instagram, which is at chriswkim. I update the Instagram much more than I update my site. So check that out first if you want to see what I'm doing recently.
Well, Chris, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you want to get across in this interview?
I'll just say a comic I read recently, which was Joe Allman's The Wood Chipper. Joe's great cartoonist, great guy. And it's classic Joe Allman, which means it's very good kind of stories of down-to-earth people. So I'd recommend that if you're looking for a comic.
Thanks to Chris for the chat. You can discover more about Chris W. Kim online at chriswkim.com and on Instagram at chriswkim. And you can discover more about Closing Act on conundrumpress.com. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to more conversations about creators, about making comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media sites, and you're encouraged to send feedback to john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2026.